Get ready to dive into the comic book realm, where heroes rise and villains take the helm. We're here to dissect the stories and the art. Our source material, we tear the panels apart.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very different attempt here on StreamYard, because we are talking source material. We are talking Gargoyles, specifically here in Manhattan. I'm going to throw this over to our host, the man who's in charge of this and who knows way more about comics than I ever will, Mr. Jesse Starcher.
Yeah, wow. This first ever recorded on StreamYard event for source material. This is going to be a lot of fun here. So we're going to be talking Gargoyles tonight. So this is the first one on our list that we're finally getting into. And you threw this at me. What was it? A couple weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. We were talking about X-Men 97.
Mm-hmm.
Dorian Price was there on X-Men 97 expressing his love of Gambit. But then after the show ended, he expressed his love of Gargoyles. Dorian, welcome to Source Material. This is your first appearance, and I appreciate it, sir, for coming on here.
I hope we don't screw it up too much so I can come back.
Yeah, I don't think you could do much to get yourself booted off Source Material.
You booted off the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network in general.
Well, if Yoga Mom hasn't pulled it off yet, no one can.
Can you kind of just give me an idea of your first interaction with comics? Whatever drew you to picking up a comic in the first place and sticking with them, maybe?
Well, I'll try to keep this short, and obviously as we talk about it, I'll be able to get into a little bit more history of it. I was raised on Batman the Animated Series, which the animated show Gargoyles was kind of Disney's answer to, well, crap, we gotta have to step up our game here. But being raised very strict Southern Baptist, a lot of things were quote unquote the devil, and Gargoyles was part of that. However, Batman for some reason got a pass. So I remember the first comic book I ever owned or ever got, bought for me was a Batman Black and White. I don't know when it had come out. It might have been before my time in the very early 90s and stuff like that. But I remember getting it in another one, and I read it, and I just slowly but surely, especially after becoming a filmmaker, I was like, these are storyboards. These are just basically storyboards that have more dialogue put to them. So Batman was really my introduction to it, and then I spread out from there. I've made the joke on the Rattlich podcast before about how, where most kids had dirty magazines under their bed, I had comic books and movies that it was like, hey, motherfucker, I got some Gargoyles if you want it. I got SpongeBob, motherfucker. Becoming this weird ass dealer. So comic books became a huge thing for me, a good escape when it was something silent you could do in the background that, that wasn't movies, but they would become movies as I was continuing to grow up. So that's the short version of that question.
My parents weren't as strict when it came to what's the devil, what's not. I mean, I couldn't play a role-playing game upstairs at the kitchen table without getting some kind of side eye from my stepdad. As oh my gosh, you guys worshiping the devil tonight? But, it was more in a joking manner. I'm sure his parents were probably a little more strict on him, and he just felt like giving us a hard time and needling us. But there was probably some truth behind that too, or at least he had some genuine feelings about it. So it's funny how things get stigmatized like that, and it sucks too, because comic books are a wonderful medium to see just about anything can happen in. You're not going to get that extra season of that show that you love because your TV networks canceled it. Comics can help you out with that every once in a while. And that's kind of what we get a little bit here. Is, we get the continuing story of some people's favorite animated characters in the Gargoyles. So I want to start off just real quick about my history with the Gargoyles, which is going to be real quick because it's about nothing. There's nothing there. When you pitched this, Alexis, I was like, I'm not a Gargoyle fan, but you know me, I'll read anything. You guys can throw anything at me. I'll read it. I'll let you know what I think about it. But I knew the Gargoyles. I knew who they were. I knew they were on, it was Fox, right? It was Fox Television, correct? Or is it CW?
Disney.
So I feel like for some reason I was pulling that, probably pairing it with the Disney.
Yeah, this was part of the Disney afternoon.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
This was one of their original shows. It wasn't one of the first ones that debuted, but it didn't come near the end. So I'd say it was about midway through the programming that they started with this show. And yeah, it was quite a departure. The Disney afternoon before this consisted of the Gummy Bears, DuckTales, Tailspin.
I can remember Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, things like that.
Oh, yeah, Chip and Dale, that too. Yeah, I completely forgot about Chip and Dale.
Right. So the Gargoyles came after, a little ways after that. And, this is 94. when it first aired, right? So I'm kind of also outside of being able to watch that too easily. So there you go. I mean, I've had no history with this other than knowing the fact that they actually existed. I can't say that I even watched any episodes. I'll be talking about with you guys tonight when we read this comic, and I'd love to get your thoughts on the art style compared to the episodes themselves, because I have no basis other than maybe what I've seen on a commercial. So, but Alexis, Gargoyles, please, what's your history?
Like I said, this was part of the Disney Afternoon, 94. So I would have been around 9 or 10. So Disney Afternoon was right up my alley. Came home from school. The tradition was came home from school, got a snack, and immediately turned on the TV. My dad was still at work. My mom worked the morning show at a radio station. So she would be asleep in the afternoon. She'd wake up when my dad came home, and then we'd have dinner. So I was just kind of left to fend for myself for a few hours. So yeah, I always put on Disney Afternoon. Gargoyles, I would say, probably has had the biggest impact on me as far as animation, next to only Batman the Animated Series. This was such a departure from what Disney was known for. Greg Weisman, the creator, had openly said he wanted to approach Disney, said he wanted to do a darker series, something that had never been done before, something that could actually compete for the audiences of Batman the Animated Series. It was clear that they were looking to go for the same demographic, the same target. It was so different. It was so much fun, so beautiful. I loved it. I loved the use of sci-fi and sorcery. I loved the way they incorporated various mythologies. You know, one episode they could be dealing with stories about King Arthur. Another one, they're fighting King Oberon and Queen Titania from Shakespeare. There's one episode where they go to Egypt and they're literally dealing with the gods of ancient Egypt. There's one episode where they come across this land populated explicitly by mythical creatures, where the human who's with them, Melissa, is the outcast instead of the gargoyles being the outcasts. It was just so much fun. You never knew what to expect. They gave really compelling character development for each of these characters. They started off pretty simple. You have Broadway, you use the fat one. You have Lexington, he's the nerdy one. You have Hudson, he's the old one. But they all had incredible story arcs, and you learn so much about them and you grow with them. And it's fascinating.
I shall be Hudson as well. Yes, because it's old and dirty, just like me.
No quoting Doug Walker.
Oh, come on. He needs all the help he can get.
Fair enough. But yeah, he did do a review about it. And even he mentioned it's like, yeah, he watched this like crazy when he was a kid. I loved it. I loved watching this. It took forever. It never got a proper DVD release here in the States. Yeah. But it got on Disney Plus, and I was thrilled. Like, yes, I get to watch this. And I loved it. Oh, except for the third season, but we'll get into that a little bit.
I've heard that's a little bit controversial.
Just a touch. And a lot of people, myself included, it's one of those shows that sadly got canceled before it had a proper wrap up. It got cut after the third season, so it never had a proper ending, but this show had such a fan following, so much devotion. We kept, Weisman would go to Comic Cons and he'd get constant requests by fans like, when are we going to see more gargoyles? It's like, yes, we know you want more gargoyles. Settle down. And he's been dying to do this. I know for a fact that there has been talks of a gargoyle movie for ages. I know Jordan Peele has said over and over again he wants to direct it, and I would be fine with that easily. But then, Weisman brought out the Gargoyles comic book that he got to write. So it wasn't just, a continuation. It was a continuation in the hands of the creator. So right. we were like, this isn't just some fan theory or anything that's not going to be canon later. This is what happens to the characters. Could not wait to start reading this book. I remember when I got the release date, I went to my comic book shop. I went to Bebop Comics and I said, when this comes out, you are to get me the issue, because they will put reserves on it when they release it. If you want to make sure that you get the issue, we'll reserve it for you. So they did that, and I'm still getting Gargoyle books, and I love them.
All right, Dorian, Gargoyles for you.
Okay, so I came in really late to the game when she's talking about the controversial third season. That was our jam.
Really?
people my age, because it's already off the air, and episodes of Gargoyles season 3, which was known as the Goliath Chronicles, are now in reruns, along with DuckTales, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, the whole shebang. The Disney afternoons dying. When I was growing up, like, the cool shit was Quack Pack. And then everybody looks at that.
That was the beginning of the death of the Disney afternoon. Quack Pack and the Mighty Ducks cartoon.
Yeah, but see, to us it wasn't, because we just got to the party. So we think this is the big band. We just missed the openers. This is what we were waiting for. So again, as I talked about before, with it being kind of Gargoyles being seen as the devil. I mean, look at the poster behind me. I mean,
right.
What Christian person is going to go? Yes, let's totally let our child watch that, because our heads are so far up our ass we can't see. Annie Hoodle,
give that man a Bible to sell.
Right? Have you found Jesus? I didn't know he was lost. My friend Jack, who I would hang out with a bunch, had an older sister who was a sophomore in high school. And she'd gotten into a very bad car accident. So her sophomore year and a good chunk of her junior year, she was kind of stuck at home. And she could move around, but it was just, you can't really be bouncing around at school. So we kind of made this weird deal. It was like, we'll do your laundry and such if you'll record Gargoyles for us. So she kind of became our dealer. So we ended up watching a whole bunch of that.
Reminder, folks, before streaming, we had to use this old contraption called a VCR.
Oh, yeah.
No, this was DVD burning.
DVD burning. Okay.
Yeah. You can make me feel even older. Way to go,
Wowzers.
Dorian.
Man.
So, because DVDs were easier to hide,
True.
VHS, you got a big motherfucker.
Big. Yep. I know what you mean.
But again, I ended up falling in love with the story simply because it was, as Alexis said, that mixture between fantasy and sci-fi. By the time we got to Goliath Chronicles, the character of Xanatos, who in the first 2 seasons had been a villain, is now a good guy. He's on the team.
Trust but verify.
Right.
They don't trust him totally, but they know he's not going to kill them.
But the point is, like, I'm sitting there listening to it going, that is the voice of Commander Riker. What the hell? And so Demona, which is a character that was voiced by Marina Sirtis, obviously who played Deanna Troi on Next Generation, didn't show up as much in the Goliath Chronicles ones, but ended up, when I went back and started watching the show in its first 2 seasons, I was able to see her more. I was like, that's okay. So the bad guy is William Riker, and the other kind of bad guy is Deanna Troi. This is just reverse Star Trek. What's happening? Then Brent Spiner shows up as Puck, and it was insane.
Whoa, wait.
And then, so there's a running joke about how the casting director for this apparently had the phone numbers for the casting director on Star Trek The Next Generation, because yes, Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, Brent Spiner, Michael Dorn. I'm trying to remember if there were any other major
sure
characters.
Patrick Stewart was like a random New York citizen who went, oh my.
I swear I might have just seen a meme about that too recently, because Facebook was logging my Gargoyle searches. That's crazy.
Yeah, Nichelle Nichols was on it. Avery Brooks, Colm Meaney, Kate Mulgrew, LeVar Burton, Paul Winfield, David Warner.
Wow. That's crazy.
The producers considered asking Frakes and Sirtis to personally appeal to Sir Patrick Stewart to perform a voice for scale, but decided it was an unfair request.
Well, he's done Family Guy and American Dad at this point, and The Simpsons. At least could have asked the man.
So you got your dose of Gargoyles hanging out with your friend while they recorded them on DVD, and you watched all of this was season 3 you were talking about, right? Or right?
Yeah, and again, eventually, like every now and again, they'd play an old one, and anytime it came on, she'd record that. So we kind of got it out of order. But years later, I was able to see it with a friend of mine who had recorded the whole thing, because they were actually a huge fan of it from day one. Like how I am for Batman the Animated Series, they were for Gargoyle. So I got the chance to watch all of it. I didn't get into the comic books until about 2 years ago, and I cannot remember what issue it is. And then I saw this one, and I was like, okay, this is from the creator. This is from God himself. This one I read the minute I got my hands on it.
Well, it's funny you talk about the Goliath Chronicles being such an important part, because this book pretty much ignores like everything in the Goliath Chronicle. I'm trying to remember if the Goliath Chronicles was helmed by if Weisman really was kind of hands off with it. I'm trying to find the info on that. But yeah, it went in a very different direction. We had a lot of much more different storylines, including one where Broadway becomes a TV personality, which was weird. And then they tried to introduce a new set of villains called the Quarrymen, who were essentially just anti-Gargoyle.
Who look like Klansmen except in black instead of white.
I thought they were dressed in dark blue. Or was that like an inking thing?
It might have been an inking thing, but they had like the whole hood thing with the like little slit eyes. And it was like, okay, so it's Klansmen except you're wearing black this time. Yes, we decided to be chic as we upgraded ourselves.
So not a lot of fans were crazy about it.
To wrap this up, a big part of Gargoyles for me, and unfortunately I was not able to get the picture in time, but I've gotten the chance to work with Keith David, who obviously was the voice of Goliath. And we got to talk about this and kind of joke about how like I'd been introduced to the Goliath Chronicles, and he's like, oh man, you just came in at the wrong time. He's like, you've seen the rest of it now, right? And I'm like, yes, I've seen the rest of it. You know, he's like, all right, I'm just making sure because like I didn't want to leave without being like, go back and watch the first 2 seasons.
Okay. Oh, here it is. The 3rd season was largely produced by an entirely different creative team than seasons 1 and 2. Some fans refused to consider this season as part of the franchise's continuity. Producer Greg Weisman later wrote a comic book continuation of the original syndicated series for Slave Labor Comics. That's what we're looking at today.
Today, we're actually looking at a 2023 from Dynamite. Slave Labor came out.
Oh, you're right. That was the time jumping with
Time Dance
Brooklyn thing. Yeah.
There's
this is a
lot
continuation of that.
Magic dance.
There was a bunch of comics. This is between 2006 and 2009 that Slave Labor Graphics continued. There was something else, I think, that was titled, I wish I could remember what it was called. I'll find it. But anyway, yeah, so there's a little bit in between this and when the series ended, and that's that Slave Labor Graphics comics that came out, which I didn't read, but I got a synopsis. Before this airs on my feed, they're going to be able to hear about 2 paragraphs of what happened in that comic. But yeah, it's still a continuation of that series. And there's some characters, I don't know, you guys might know these characters that are in this book better than I do, but supposedly some of these characters that are showing up in this book are ones that weren't in the series, but I could be wrong. So you guys point them out. I don't know if you guys saw any or not, but did you guys recognize everybody that was in here that we read?
I haven't read the slave comics, and for the record, I tried looking them up. Good luck finding those at a decent price on eBay. People who have them know that they're not going to get reprinted, and they're pricey.
Jesse, I think you meant, did we recognize all the characters from Here in Manhattan?
Here in Manhattan. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. Okay, good. So they didn't throw any in here that were possibly introduced in that series to leave people confused. Like, oh man, I got to find these comics to understand where these characters are coming from. So as long as you guys saw them all, then great.
I think the only characters I wasn't familiar with were some of the mutants down in the Labyrinth. I knew about the Time Dance, so I knew about Brooklyn's May Katana. I knew about their son and their egg. I knew all about that. I knew about Broadway and Angela getting together. But yeah, they talk about a bunch of mutants living down the labyrinth. I'm like, okay, I missed that part.
Yeah, Talon
not surprising?
Was Talon?
Yes, Talon was in the original series.
Okay, all right.
Talon and Maggie both were.
I don't think you need to know much else because the rest of those, they're kind of.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a whole bunch of gargoyles that are on a building, and when nightfall comes, they break out of the rocks and they go kick ass. If you can understand that, you're caught up.
All right, so let's get into Here in Manhattan here. We already talked about half of our creative team, which is Greg Weisman. The other half is a person by the name of George, and I'm most likely going to mispronounce this, believe it or not.
I actually looked this one up.
Did you?
I can actually say his name correctly. Kambadais.
Kambadais. Okay, very good. All right, so George Kambadais, he's the illustrator. Now, I looked up I just went on the comic database and checked out what he had done there, but he also has a website. According to him, he says, I've worked with DC Comics, Dynamite, IDW, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, Oni, and others. Right now, I'm working on the Gargoyles for Dynamite and on IDW's Dungeons and Dragons Saturday Morning Adventures. So he's not been in the business very long, but he's definitely made a little bit of an impact. When you're doing some illustrating for the big two, it's a big deal.
I just want to give a good shout out to another one of the artists who did the covers. That's Amanda Connor.
Oh, yeah.
Did a lot of great things. Got some not so known people, David Nakayama and Jai Lee, who also helped with that as well. But since we talked about artists, they deserve a shout out.
So I assume your guys' trade has all the covers, variant covers for each issue. This was only 6 issues, correct?
The Here in Manhattan is only the first 6 issues.
All right.
The story does continue. They said that another trade will be coming out.
Yeah.
I don't have the exact date in front of me, but I told my guys at the comic shop to make sure that when it comes out, I'd love to be on the list. I joked to them because they're like, well, you did order the individual issues. I'm like, yeah, but trade looks better on the bookshelf.
Yeah, they have announced that they are going to issue 12 with this storyline.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
And the last one, just to tease everyone so you keep listening to the podcast, and maybe we'll have more information for you. The last one will be called Gargoyles number 12, Phoenix.
Phoenix. Interesting. Okay, all right. Well, all right. So yeah, let me go ahead and I'll break down the first 3 issues here. In the bustling cityscape of Manhattan, NYPD detective Elisa Mazza and her partner Matt Bluestone find themselves embroiled in a high-speed chase, hot on the trail of some ATM bandits. Their pursuit is dramatically aided by the city's hidden protectors, the Gargoyles, who swoop in to apprehend the criminals. Among these Gargoyles is Goliath, their formidable leader, who shares a romantic relationship with Elisa. Brooklyn, Goliath's loyal second-in-command, is a prominent figure in the clan. He has a mate named Katana, and together they have a son, Nashville, affectionately called Nash. Brooklyn's Rookery brothers, Lexington and Broadway, are also integral members of the group. Goliath's wise mentor, Hudson, and the enigmatic Coldstone, a cyborg zombie gargoyle, along with Cold Fire, a robot gargoyle, and Coldstone's partner, add to the diverse clan. Goliath's daughter, Angela, who is in a relationship with Broadway, further enriches the Gargoyle family. The Gargoyles are bound by a unique existence. They come to life only at night, turning to stone during the day. Recently, Elisa, Matt, and the Gargoyles attempted to quash a gang war by arresting the leaders, Tony Dracon and Thomas Broden.
Admittedly, the character was brought in very quickly near the end of the second season, and I think actually only appeared in 1 or 2 episodes, whereas Dracon and his family line was seen in a lot of the first 2 seasons of Gargoyles. It's kind of interesting how much they play up not just the fantasy of the Gargoyles, but since they are now the protectors of Manhattan, we do see a lot with them working with Elisa, a police detective, to help take down the crime families.
Okay.
Which again is very much, in my opinion, kind of, and again, the season creator, I get it. Again, I love everything he's done. Kind of reaching back to that whole, well, it worked with Batman and Jim Gordon, so shut up. These people have wings too. There's just more of them.
All right. So the remnants of their gangs now battle for control, causing chaos and inviting other gangs to try and seize the opportunity.
Nothing worse than a power vacuum.
That's right. That's right. Coldstone and Coldfire return from patrol, reporting a recent skirmish between the gangs that they managed to disrupt. Coldstone is conflicted, questioning why they should protect humanity and even suggests revealing their existence. Goliath reminds them of their ancient purpose. They are sworn to protect the castle and to aspire towards a future where they can coexist peacefully with humans, though the time is not yet right. Elisa receives an urgent message from her brother Derek. Now, Derek, in parentheses, was a human at one point, but now has been transformed, okay, stay with me, into a creature named Talon, which is a blend of a panther, a bat, and an electric eel, okay? Go ahead.
Xanatos, the original bad guy for the first 2 seasons, was dead set on creating his own loyal gargoyles. He wanted the gargoyles, but he wanted ones that would obey only him. He contacted a criminal mad scientist named Anton Severius, voiced by Tim Curry, because who else? To create this.
We need a mad scientist. Don't get strung out by the way I look. Oh, right on time, buddy.
The idea was that it was like, well, kind of like my necklace with the cat gargoyle design. I believe the electric eel was because they couldn't figure out how the gargoyles were maintaining their energy. Because for a gargoyle to exist the way it was, they had to eat like 3 times their body weight in order to do the things they do.
No.
The electric eel genes were to help them control and harness energy, which, as a nice little plus side effect, also gave them electric powers. So, OP.
No, the reason
And
the electric eel and everything else was because Xanatos got really drunk and watched that weird ass Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer Island of Dr. Moreau and went, I can do that.
But yeah, short version, too late. Derek Mazza was hired as a bodyguard for Xanatos, accidentally got shot with the mutagen. Of course, we find out in later episodes this was planned all along. You find out that Xanatos, it's kind of scary how much he is 10 steps ahead of everyone.
Playing that long game, huh?
Yeah, he plays the long game like crazy. And then you come across Thylog, who I'm sure you'll get to, who's even more planning 10 steps ahead of the game. And it just...
He was trained by Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Why are you shocked? I'm going to keep coming back to that. I'm sorry.
But yes, that is always a constant thing in this series. The villains are always at least one step ahead of the gargoyles. They have contingency plan after contingency plan. They know how every character is going to react, and they plan accordingly.
There's actually a reason for that. This is actually, in all seriousness, this is not a joke. There was a reason for that in the writing of the show originally. Was that obviously Batman the Animated Series is taking the world by storm, and Batman always wins. You know, there's actually an episode called Riddler's Reform in Batman the Animated Series, where at the end there's a no-win scenario for Batman, and he still gets out of it. And like the Riddler's in Arkham going, I want to know how he did it, you know. And we cut to like Dick Grayson and Bruce, and Dick's like, how did you do it? He's like, well, when everything went to hell, I got in the safe. And it's like, really? Okay, well, you're Batman.
Yeah, he jumped into a safe to avoid a giant explosion.
So again, which works, but again, there was a whole bunch of notes given by Disney execs that the characters of our heroes, the Gargoyles, could not be so overpowered or overintelligent that they'd be able to beat everything in the way Batman did. They wanted the characters to have have flaws and be like, crap, we didn't see this one coming. Now we got to scramble to add not only to the tension, but also separate from Batman the Animated Series.
Right. Makes sense.
You still have a handful of villains who get defeated on a regular basis. You have Fox and Hyena, who show up periodically and got beaten. You have some criminals of the week kind of a thing. But yeah, Thylog and Xanatos were always just like, oh, they won this little battle. The war is still continuing kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a brief issue with the mutagen thing, even though I was not, by the time I was in the game, this show's off the air, it's having its sequels, I will create a mutagen that will do this. I'm going, excuse me, that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they kind of already have the market cornered on that. Turtles show up to Xanatos. You've been served, bruh.
The
No,
Turtles will
that's why
cross over with anybody, by the way.
But the turtles were called the mutants. Those living in the labyrinth with talent are called the mutates.
Oh, there you go.
We changed a letter.
There actually should be a crossover between the Turtles and the Gargoyles. I mean, that I don't understand why. Why has? I mean, my goodness, they have cross paths with just about everybody. Gargoyles should be on the list. But
hey, I've still got Batman versus the Ninja Turtles, both in comic form and on DVD, and it's one of my favorite guilty pleasures.
So Talon, who is Elisa's brother, sends a message and says, hey, you need to get over here. You're about to be an aunt. You are going to get Maggie the cat.
Obligatory moment of silence for the Tennessee Williams fans who actually got that joke.
She is on the verge of giving birth. All right. So in our second issue, Angela, Goliath, and Broadway visit Brooklyn's unhatched egg, Eguardo, apparently. What a name, huh? Eguardo.
I love Katana. It's a joke name, isn't it?
Yep. Their visit is cut short when Angela, Goliath, Coldfire, and Broadway rush to witness Maggie's delivery, only to find everyone unconscious. And Maggie, along with the midwife, Mary, missing. Mary, Mary awakens to a nightmarish scene. All right, so Mary's waking up and she sees Maggie still in labor, but they are now prisoners in a lab run by the nefarious Dr. Anton Savarius, who is taking orders from the villainous Thylog. Is that how you pronounce it? Thylog?
Yep, Goliath spelled backwards.
Oh, that's right. That is right.
No, that's literally who he is. He's Goliath's clone.
He's his clone.
Yeah, again, for the longest time, that was all Xanatos wanted, was obedient gargoyles. So he tried everything to try to get it.
Meanwhile, in the writer's room, hey, Bizarro worked for Superman. We'll just do the same thing and just see if anybody catches it.
Nobody's going to notice.
Hey, it gives us a dual performance from Keith David, okay? No complaints.
I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out what they did.
No complaints.
Yeah, not to mention Keith David is freaking awesome when he gets to play a villain. He lands that evil laugh so well.
Oh, man. Believing Xanatos is behind the abduction, Goliath and his team confront him, along with Derek. Meanwhile, the Dracon crime family is in turmoil as Dominic Dracon, the elder patriarch, is released from Bellevue Hospital. He's feigning a little bit of dementia there. His granddaughter, Antoinette Dracon, collects him, and they anxiously anticipate Uncle Dino's release from prison and his potential takeover of the family business. Yes, that's right. There are the criminal underworld is in upheaval. And there is one guy that's still getting out of prison, and these guys are worried about Dino. Dino's going to cause some problems. What are we going to do when he gets out? Now, in the third issue, Xanatos denies any involvement in Maggie's abduction. No, it's not me. Goliath, trusting him, convinces Derek to stand down. Surprisingly, Xanatos offers his assistance in locating Maggie and Mary. They soon deduce that Thyalog is the true mastermind behind the kidnapping. Donning his gargoyle armor, Xanatos joins the team as they head to Nightstone Unlimited, only to find it fortified with force fields. Xanatos manages to breach the shields, allowing Derek, Goliath, Broadway, Coldfire, and Angela to storm in, where Maggie is definitely in labor. A fierce battle ensues with Thyalog as Mary focuses on delivering Maggie's baby. The conflict reaches a sudden halt when Maggie gives birth to a completely human child. Disappointed, Thyalog ceases his attack, permitting them to leave with the newborn be gone. Back at the labyrinth,
tell me anyone else get like a Twilight Breaking Dawn ending there, just like, oh, never mind, get out.
Well, no, yep. It only works if Thyalog is
oh, God.
Like Michael Sheen did in the movie. Then, yeah, you'll be like, okay, now we're in the pipe. Let's do this.
I can hear Tim Curry doing that.
Please.
So you Fern Gully fans out there.
Oh, you're right. Thyalog ceases his attack, permitting them to leave with the newborn. Back at the labyrinth, the baby is named Michael Peter Massa, and the community gathers to welcome the newest member. However, as night falls and Maggie puts the child to sleep, it becomes clear that the infant possesses mysterious powers unknown to everyone else. And that's how we end issue 3. So there you go. First 3 issues of Here in Manhattan. I do like how they start each issue kind of like at the vantage point of one of the clan, because as we reach further into the series, it's not just going to be strictly the clan that they're looking, they start the issue with. Sometimes it's other people, but I do like that. I think that's pretty cool. It's a neat way of getting people, in tune with the character. We'll just put it that way. I am also appreciative of the fact that there are a ton of characters in this franchise, and I don't have a problem keeping track of who is who. I was kind of confused, the Coldfire, Coldstone, which one's which, but then it took me a couple seconds. I was like, oh yeah, that's the zombie guy. And I was able to figure that one out from there on out. They all look very different. Clearly you want that. Our artist here does a fantastic job of letting us at least be able to follow the art and the characters at the same time. Sometimes artists can't do that, and it's hard to tell the difference between some characters, but luckily I'm sure that Weisman was like, we need somebody that could do this.
Another way that really helps is that in a lot of the scenes, the boxes, especially the either voiceover from the back or the narration, they're done in different colors.
True.
For example, you have this scene with the Coldstone's dialogue is highlighted in black, Coldfire's is highlighted in yellow.
Right.
So little things like that also really help, because I'm sure there's even sometimes where it's like when you have that large battle in the as the baby's being born, you have characters talking, you have everyone fighting, you're going, wait, who's saying what?
Right.
I appreciate it when they put in that extra effort to help the reader.
100%.
Right. It kind of goes back to that scene from that super old movie, Aristocats. When the mouse is trying to break the safe and there's a fight going on in the background. He finally turns and goes, quiet. Thank you. Goes back to work. Because, that confusion can sometimes, especially if you're having a huge scene, get really confusing on who's, wait, who's saying who to what now?
Right. Exactly.
Well, I'm sure, Jesse, I'm sure you've seen some splash pages of fight scenes where it was abundantly clear that the artists did not make enough notes on where to put the dialogue boxes. So you're looking and it's going, wait, who's what? And
Right.
it becomes very hard to tell who's saying what.
And it sucks too because it'll take you out. You know, you're in the midst of like, okay, it's a heated battle. These are my characters, and then you're trying to figure things out. And it kind of takes you back into like shit.
The only time I've seen that done well ended up bringing this kind of into Star Wars canon. Before Star Wars Visions became a TV show, they had a actual comic book of just random artists that had had a storyline and stuff like that. And they had a fight between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They were still white voice bubbles, and they were talking through the Force. They did do something so different as like the ragged lines around Maul's stuff was more violent, and the ones around Kenobi's was a little bit more calm. But again, if you weren't paying attention, it did make you lean in and read, does Palpatine know? Oh shit, this is Obi-Wan. Again, there have been, especially older ones, where it's like, did you realize that actual people were going to be reading this and be somewhat confused? Or were you just like, look at what I have created.
Look at what I've done.
Weep at my amazingness.
Make sense of it.
Ask me what it means.
Right.
That is your third time quoting Doug Walker on this show.
Needs all the help he can get. I want to ask, and we'll start with you, Alexis, and then Dorian, because you watched the third season, Dorian, and Alexis watched, obviously fan of the first two, and I know you guys all watched all three, but Xanatos and Goliath's relationship, you've already kind of talked about it a little bit, about how they were it was an antagonistic relationship at first. So, Alexis, what was it like in the series between these two?
For the longest time, Goliath never wanted to trust Xanatos. He was absolutely furious with him. I remember one episode where for a while the characters actually had to flee the castle, and they are actually living in a clock tower above police headquarters, because Xanatos is basically kind of clear. It's like Xanatos is going to kill them if they stay there. And Goliath sees this news report about Xanatos doing a charitable donation and talking about how he has so much to give and everything. And Goliath just storms out. He is so furious. It takes forever for him to even be willing to be near him and not wanting to just choke the life out of him. He blames Xanatos for practically everything. And yet, strangely enough, Xanatos managed to get him to be his best man at his and Fox's wedding. Go figure. So, it's very much trust but verify. There's a lot of times, in fact, what was the great line where there's an episode where they have to save Fox, and Goliath helps Xanatos do it, and Xanatos looks at Goliath and says, "Now you know my only weakness." And Goliath looks at him and goes, "Only you would consider love a weakness."
So in the third season, Dorian, they're friends?
Well, I mean, not bestest buddies, Goliath and Xanatos, Rescue Rangers
in all series,
right? But there's an understanding, and obviously, again, getting to see the original episodes did kind of change, a little bit later, changed my thought on that. But again, there got to a point where Goliath, again, being somebody who dude, I can rip you in two. And Xanatos being smart enough to realize, yeah, I know that, things kind of fell backwards a little bit, not in a bad way, but just, okay, is this you? Dude, I have been sitting right here, again, they couldn't do this on Disney Channel. I was always waiting for, and I know they never do it, but Goliath to bust in the doors of Xanatos's, private quarters. And he's making out with two girls on his bed going, "Can I help you?" And the Goliath being there was an issue earlier. I thought you were involved. Never mind. And fucking leaving. So I really liked their relationship, and I liked how this comic book played on it, simply because it's okay, yeah, you're the first one I go to. Mm-hmm. For every heroic character, there is their devil.
Main nemesis.
Main nemesis. Nemesis. For those of you who are fans of Mystery Men, there you go. Nemesis. But there's also those moments where it's dude, I am not the only one trying to light fire to your world. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm not doing anything. And I there were moments in the show that it wasn't always Xanatos, it was someone else. But you got that hint that Goliath's first thought was what the hell, dude? I am going to chop off your ponytail just to piss you off.
There's also kind of Xanatos is always suave, calm, smug. You know, there is very rarely a time in the series where you actually see him legit angry. I don't think he yells or raises his voice at all through the entire series.
One of the things I loved about Xanatos is he was very much the Professor Moriarty style character. And whereas Goliath is very intelligent, it's not like Professor Moriarty to Sherlock Holmes. They weren't ripping something off. It's like Goliath is very deep, very soulful. It almost felt like they took, for Xanatos, the character of Professor Moriarty, and based that off, use that as the basis. And for Goliath went, what if Superman was a goth? And to me, I think you can tell that Xanatos is much more intelligent in the world he lives in because Goliath hadn't lived in that world for very, very long. And Goliath has this code that he sticks to that is from 1,000 years ago. And Xanatos is like, hey, my brain just keeps getting bigger. I just kind of roll with the punches of the world I live in. And one of the reasons that we love Goliath as a hero, he's like, no, this is wrong. This is right. This is what we're going to do. And hell be damned if it doesn't work with everyone else's aesthetic. So,
well, sticking with the series and comparing it to the comic, what do you think of the art style, Dorian, comparing it to what you saw in the series?
I actually really liked it. It wasn't exactly, obviously, what I remember, but again, I knew it wasn't going to be, from cartoon to comic book. But reading it, I felt I was right back there in the world that I knew, and I was very, very impressed with the art style. It didn't take me out of it. Again, like I said, I felt like I was just right back in that world. But as I started off talking about, it did feel like a storyboard. This is what you would animate were we to continue. And again, if, hell, this podcast, and I hope a whole bunch of other people are talking about here in Manhattan, listen to this podcast first and listen to all the other ones they've done. Then go look for other peoples that have done Gargoyles in Manhattan. But I would be excited if Disney, and especially the original creator and the animators that he could bring around, could come back and do this as a storyline, especially a more mature one, because the fans have grown up. I love the art style. It didn't drive off the highway. Was my point.
So, Alexis, your thoughts on the art style?
I agree, but not in the way of like it looked like a dopey cartoon or anything. It definitely matched the style. There was a couple of panels that I wasn't a huge fan of, mostly just some of the human designs. I know there was at least one where Eliza's in the jail, and there was a way she looked at someone else, just like, that's Eliza? What the hell? Just it looked so off. But better than I could probably draw. So, I was like, okay, what are you going to do? But for the most part, I thought it looked great. I loved the shading and the use of lighting in this. I loved how little they relied on black lines to define these characters. So much of the lighting was just done from lighting the colors. A lot of artists we know would still have black lines defining their muscles and where all of the parts of their body are. This doesn't. There's so many parts of where you look at the way the gargoyles are drawn. It's just the use of the lighter color, and it looks great. I love it when an artist can use highlights like that.
I agree 100%. All right, last question, and I'll let you guys, if you guys have any thoughts on these first 3 issues, I'll let you throw them out there. Did you read them in the voices of their characters? So, in other words, I assume there was no separating in your head what you heard on the television show versus what you were reading?
Are you kidding me? If I had my way, I'd have Keith David narrate my life.
And Alexis went and made Scrabble tiles for her next project. And then we stood guarding her work.
You wish that your voice was that awesome.
I can't go that deep. I'm sorry. I was doing my best.
You can.
What?
I said, few can.
Like I can.
The man's got a baritone that makes everyone's legs turn to jelly.
It's like I can do Conroy as Batman. That's the best I got going.
I was Conroy. That was impressive. Although, admittedly, it gets funny when you get to D.A. Yale, who was okay. So again, it is so hard to talk about this book without going into mountains of exposition about these characters from the series. My God, this is hard. This I suddenly feel like I'm back on the Harry Potter discussion where Mark just basically asked me his questions. I'm going, well, actually trying to discuss why something was in the movie. It's like, well, if you read the book, it makes sense.
Okay, if she's going to do that, real quick, folks, for those of you who are listening, pause it right here. Go to Disney Plus. They're not paying us to say this, but go to Disney Plus, watch the first 2 seasons of Gargoyles, then come back, and what she's about to say will make total sense. 3, 2, 1. Okay, Alexis, fire away.
Okay, so this actually was canon from the 3rd season. D.A. Yale was a background character in the first 2 seasons called Margot. She and her husband, Brendan, because she pronounced his name exactly like that, were often seen at the place where the gargoyles something would happen and the gargoyles would interfere.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, someone's getting mugged. Oh, it's Brendan and Margot. Gargoyles gonna interfere. Magic is spouting out. Someone's running away. It's Margot and Brendan. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like with Watchmen with Bernie and the kid who always read the comic books at his stand.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Same concept. Well, Margot they were supposed to be this very 90s yuppies couple, especially since Margot still has that freaking huge headband, And yeah, she had the snobbiest voice. Again, her husband's name was Brendan. She's like, give him your wallet, Brendan, when they're getting robbed. So whenever I hear or I see her talk, it's like, I cannot imagine it without that snobby 90s yuppie voice. I just can't. It's Julia Louis-Dreyfus in freaking Christmas Vacation.
Oh my God. Give him your wallet, Brendan.
There was this airy snobbery to it.
Okay. It's interesting because, I have no basis other than what I could barely remember in the commercials. And so I have no idea what these characters sound like. And I read this book, and now I'm going to probably watch a couple episodes of Gargoyles pretty soon, because I know at some point, we're probably going to cover the second half of this book when it gets released. And Dorian, I'm sure you're doing the same thing, right? Are you reading it in the voices of the characters?
For a good chunk of it, yeah. I actually, when I got the comic book, and especially when I knew I was going to be on this, I went back and I watched some of the, my favorite episodes from the whole thing, just kind of just reignite the fire. Like, it's never gone out, but just get into that headspace. But yeah, even as I was reading it, I was like, again, you hear Keith David as Goliath. You just have to. I mean, that's just,
right.
That's how it is. But I did go back and I listened to some of the voices and such, and was just like, what's funny is that these voices were already still in my head. I just didn't remember they were in my head. So it was kind of a beautiful moment for me. And I started actually letting the episodes go, and I start going through the comic book and the trade. And it was just like, yep. So to me, it was kind of a beautiful, like, almost seeing an old friend you haven't seen in a long time being like, well, how the hell are you?
I should add that even if you're not, besides the Star Trek fans, this show's cast had some A-list voice actors. Besides Keith David, you have Jeff Bennett as Brooklyn, Bill Fagerbakke, who a lot of people also know as Patrick Starr as Broadway. You have Frank Welker doing Bronx, Ed Asner as Hudson, Tom Wilson as Bluestone, Kath Soucie as Maggie the Cat. You have recurring characters voiced by Laura San Giacomo, Jim Cummings, John Rhys-Davis, Clancy Brown.
Wow.
Like I said, I mentioned Tim Curry, Matt Frewer, Cree Summer.
Well, I know I've hit you guys with a lot of questions. These first 3 issues, I do want to throw them to you. So, basically what we get here in our first 3, we get our reintroduction to the Gargoyles, kind of what they're doing. We've got this big to-do with Maggie having her baby, and apparently it's possibly getting stolen by Thyalog. And then by the end of the 3rd, we got all the criminal underground stuff happening in the background, it seems. And then we see the little baby may possibly have powers. So, Dorian, I'll throw it to you here first. Any notes on the first 3 that you can think of that you want to toss out there?
Not only as a lover of the show, but also as a filmmaker and a writer, I loved how they broke this down, because by the time you get to the end of part 3, they've broken up the 3-act structure, even though kept it at the same time. We have our first act was like, this is the world. If, you weren't a Gargoyles fan, but your girlfriend was, and you're the boyfriend that she's handing the comic book to. It does introduce you to it very well. We get through Act 1 into what I was called the cataclysm. You know, this is our problem. Especially, and I loved the whole, oh, it's human, take and get out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, moment of, because anyone who's a writer or anyone who's a film lover at all sees that, and especially if you know the 3-act structure, goes, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're like, yay, we won. Oh no, we didn't. Oh no. Because it's one of those, like, if the good guys win and there's still 30 minutes left in the movie, you're going, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very happy about that. The first 3 issues was fantastic. It was a wonderful reintroduction to it, and I loved how they literally just cut off a quarter of the way into what would be the second act structure and just left us there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you were getting these just by issue, you'd be screaming at the comic book going, no, you can't do this to me. You know,
Right.
Hey, you know what? Those of us who still remember having to watch TV when you couldn't stream a whole series at once, and watching an episode, it ends on a cliffhanger. It's like, see you next week.
No. And man, oh man. Yeah. Alexis, what are your thoughts?
A little bit of spoilery for the upcoming issues, but I have to admit, I was a bit surprised with how much they dropped the whole thing with Talon and Maggie's baby. It's such a heavy part of these first 3 issues, and I love that they're continuing the storyline with these characters. The remaining 3 issues, they're never come up again.
I'm just going to go ahead and be a little bit more spoilery, and I got to issue 10, and this ain't coming back up yet. So.
Yeah, I'm starting to go, it's like, really? You revealed this kid still has his parents' electric powers or something else? I'm assuming
Right.
that's what those eyes meant.
Right.
And nothing. I had assumed there would at least be one line from Elisa or from the other Gargoyles about how they couldn't wait to go see the baby, you know, because they talk about, you know, all the characters like, oh, we can't wait to see the baby. I mean, this is essentially a Gargoyle baby.
Mhm.
You know, that's what the mutates are. They are a varied form of Gargoyle. You would think that this would be something that would come up.
I love that they did that because it hooked you, it kept you there, and you kept leaning forward going, and they take you on a whole different path. I love when movies do that. I love when comic books do that. So again, I got to respectfully disagree, Alexis. I love that they did that because it's like, okay, baby's safe, baby's born, we're good. Oh, there's other crap we got to deal with.
Yeah, it's setting up something at some point. You know, that's got, I mean, clearly you don't do that without being like, okay, something's got to happen at some point. And I'm all for that. Take me on another journey. And then, you know, when they do another series or we get to issue 13, we revisit it and we talk about it. But anyway, go ahead.
Like I said, I don't mind things like that, but I don't like it when they're dropped 100% cold turkey.
I want more. Tell me more.
Does that make sense? It's like, I'm okay with them holding off on resolving it for another storyline. I'm okay with that, but I just don't like that. And there's no mention of it ever again.
Well, there is something in filmmaking that's called cut the shoe leather. And what that means is if we have a scene where the point of the scene, what we're trying to get to is that Jesse is going to walk into your house, Alexis, and have a conversation with you. If we see Jesse in the car driving, or like we see him in his house and we see him gathering his notes, and then we see him in the car, and then we see him at your front door, we see him knocking on the front door. If we cut to him sitting down in your office, that's fine, because everything in between is what's called shoe leather. And the reason for that is if you've had a pair of like old school leather shoes, they have that creak to it when you move. We don't need to hear all of that creaking. We know these characters. We love these characters. You bought this trade, more than likely you saw the show or you bought it for somebody that you care about who loved the show. They know the characters. You know for a fact that they have gone and checked on the baby since then. It's fine. They know the baby's okay. We as the audience don't need that shoe leather because we know. You know, it starts breaking down to a sense that you're taking up the time that we can go to a more important part of the story with going of, and Alexis checked on the baby 4 times and made sure that he was tucked in and had a very warm blanket. You know, I'm sorry, I'm using you as an example just because I don't want to like tear about the story. So again, I see what you're talking about and I agree, but at the same time, it can be seen as shoe leather.
Well, the other thing is shoe leather or slash when it comes to comics. page count. I've only got so many pages I can do.
Very
and
true.
I mean that unfortunately is a lot of what, kind of hampers some storytelling every once in a while, or at least what a storyteller wants to get out there. So you never know. They might have actually intended to let's throw a mention of the baby in here. We don't have the pages for it. We got to get to this right now. We got to get to that right now. So
Very true.
But yeah, I mean, I get it. I do. I understand both arguments there for sure. All right. Second part. Here we go. Next 3 issues. This is issues 4 through 6. In the 4th issue, the formidable Dino Dracon is released from prison, showing no signs of reformation. As he reconnects with his criminal empire, Dino discovers that the Dracons are no longer at the top of the crime families, and to his surprise, learns the Gargoyles are now allied with the police. Meanwhile, Goliath and his mentor Hudson sent out on a routine patrol of the city. Goliath is troubled by a growing sense of distance with their once close clan. Their patrol leads them to a park where they witness a group of henchmen disguised as gargoyles attempting to abduct some children, some teenagers, we'll put it that way. As they intervene, the henchmen manage to escape with the teenagers. The 3 helicopters arrive, demanding Goliath surrender. Despite his efforts to escape, Goliath is ensnared in a net and captured. Matt Bluestone steps in, explaining that he leads the Gargoyles task force and urging Goliath to trust him as they take him away by helicopter. Back at the castle, Broadway and Angela are preparing for their commitment ceremony when Hudson arrives with the grim news of Goliath's capture. Goliath awakens in a cell opposite of Tony Dracon and Thomas Brode, 2 characters you don't want to be sitting across from. I think Goliath can hold his own, though. Elisa visits Goliath, only to see him turn to stone in his cell. She confronts Matt, who explains that a wealthy benefactor donated funds to upgrade their equipment for the Gargoyle task force, and because of that, the mayor has mandated the capture of a gargoyle. We've got the money now. What are you doing? You can't be sitting on this. You got to go get me a gargoyle. The clan devises a plan to rescue Goliath, but Elisa warns of increased security. Undeterred, Brooklyn leads Cold Stone and Cold Fire on a precision extraction mission. They successfully breach the prison, but are met with resistance. Despite gaining the upper hand, Goliath asks them both to leave, deciding to face the public and trial. Elsewhere, the Choi and Sanchez crime families receiving alarming news. Their children, Peter Choi and Rosaria Sanchez, have disappeared, and each family believes the other has kidnapped their child for ransom. So again, more deadly dealings with these crime families in the underground. The 6th issue delves deeper into Goliath's resolve. He insists that Brooklyn and the others leave, determined to see if humanity will accept the Gargoyles. Xanatos steps in and securing legal counsel for Goliath. We learn that Dino orchestrated the kidnapping of the Choi and Sanchez children to ignite conflict between the families. Dino also attempts to assassinate a Russian crime boss who survives, but still furthers Dino's plan to sow mistrust among these crime families. Antoinette Dracon seeks out Broadway, pleading for help. Broadway and Lexington encounter drones attacking a building owned by another crime boss by the name of Slaughter. Despite their intervention, they are quickly outnumbered. Elisa returns to the castle with the news that Goliath will stand trial to determine his sentience. Yeah, this is interesting. It's not really going to be they're going to first look to see if they can consider a gargoyle sentient. And Antoinette confronts Dino, urging him to reconsider his plan to kill Broad, especially since her brother shares Broad's cell. Dino seemingly agrees, but advises Wolf, a member of the pack, which I don't know if he's a member at this time. It's obviously just Wolf that we could see at the end of this book, now transformed into a Wolfman, which was he transformed in the series, in the animated series, into a Wolfman?
The pack was a squad of mercenaries who had their own TV show funded by Xanatos, who tried to kill the Gargoyles very early in the first season. They ended up going their separate ways over time. You have Fox, who ended up getting released from prison. You have the twins, Hyena and Jackal, who are just sociopaths and would spring up from time to time to commit various crimes and try to get their revenge. You had Dingo, who ended up foregoing the criminal way and sort of going on a redemption path in Australia, which I think the slave labor comic talked about. And then you have Wolf. Now, about halfway through, I want to say it was the first season, Xanatos also sent a robot version of himself to assist the pack once the rest of them got out of jail, calling himself Coyote.
Oh, yeah, I remember this character. Okay.
And Coyote said, hey, have you guys ever thought about upgrades? So Wolf gets spliced and becomes this human-wolf hybrid, and Jackal and Hyena become cyborgs.
Okay. All right.
Gets a mech suit very similar to Iron Man. And there's actually this great bit in that episode where Jackal and Hyena are making fun. I was like, we did what you were too afraid to do, you know?
I'm sorry. I do like the fact that Jackal and Hyena were, and the fact that they were teamed up, were done purposely. Because think about what it sounds like. Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Got it.
They've done that on purpose of, kind of messing with them. Like, hey, kids, you should read more books. But since you're here, see if you can catch the joke.
Yeah. And then to add even more, to this story arc, we find out that Wolf is, I'm trying to remember if he's a reincarnation or a descendant of the Viking who originally killed the rest of Goliath's clan.
Okay. None of that did I get when I saw Wolf. I knew Wolf was a big, I assumed he was a pretty big reveal here at the end of this 6th issue as he's standing there and Dino's like, yeah, I need you to take care of some stuff for me. And I was like, who is this guy? Who is this?
So yeah, Wolf is a mercenary. He's a human wolf hybrid. He loves to fight the gargoyles, and he's voiced by Clancy Brown.
All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much how we end the 6th issue is, Dino's like, hey, I got a job for you. You need to take care of Thomas Brode. Oh, yeah. If my nephew gets in the way, Tony, if he gets in the way, if something happens, but don't make it a point to kill him. But if he gets in the way, make sure to take care of Thomas Brode. And that's kind of how we end that. I mean, I'm sure Wolf has plans to go also confront Goliath, who's sitting there in the cell across from him. But regardless, there we are here in Manhattan, folks. I want to start with you, Alexis, just real quick. I only got a couple questions for these last 3, but what do you think of our Dino here?
It's interesting because because the Dracon crime family was a large part of the Gargoyle series. Again, very similar to Dorian, a little help. What was the name of the crime boss in Batman Begins?
Falcone.
Yeah, it's a parallel very similar to the Falcone crime family from DC. So, in fact, Dino Dracon was voiced. Oh my God, what was the name of the actor who voiced Richard Grieco voiced freaking Tony Dracon.
B-movie and softcore porn star.
I had no idea it was in the softcore porn. But
when you're raised by somebody who's older and really horny, and you just kind of have to sit there and watch whatever they want to watch, you see a lot of shit.
Oh, it's funny.
I actually saw him in something quote unquote good, and I was like, oh my dude, I'm glad you got more work.
If looks could kill, I remember that one. That might have been, oh my gosh, 1991. Wow.
I just knew him from Night at the Roxbury.
Okay, all right.
Richard Grieco, what are you doing here? I don't want to get sued.
What are you doing here? Paycheck.
Plenty of made-for-TV movies. May have even been in a Lifetime movie here or there.
But again, I want to be very clear. If for some reason, Easton was upon this podcast, sir, I am not insulting you. You are a fantastic actor.
No,
Richard.
No way.
You have done great stuff.
Agree.
Again, it was one of the things that was great about the 90s and the animated shows we had and the actors we had, ones that, yes, have become legend now. I mean, like Kevin Conroy as Batman, and, obviously Mark Hamill is the Joker, just, if we keep the Batman stuff. Because we had actors who had been working for decades in B movies that gave performances that, had it been live action, would have been Oscar worthy. And again, not that Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy and obviously Keith David in this, and very briefly coming back to the idea of like them making a live action movie. If they're going to do it, A, do it right, and B, I really think you should do it before Keith David decides he either doesn't want to act anymore, or, because you need that voice behind it. And not that there's not other people who can do that voice, but again, he's still alive. He's the king. Let the king sit on his throne.
He's Husk. He's our Husk.
Don't get ahead of the story. There will be a source material, I'm sure, on the Has-Been Hotel prequel comics.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
We'll let you know when Vivzy Pop writes them.
One step at a time.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on Dino there, Dorian?
I like the characters. I liked our antagonists, our villains for this. I obviously love seeing Xanatos show back up and kind of this I didn't do shit role. I still see him as an antagonist.
Right.
I just love how calm he was. You got freaking Talon kicking down the door into the room where his wife, and his infant son are, and Xanatos literally like, "Oh, hi. I heard you're having a child." Just like he's just so calm.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, the crime bosses, I really liked how and actually Alexis literally took a note that I was about to say, so well done, you said it anyways. I liked how gritty they got with this one. And this wasn't a apocalyptic villain, but it can be a personally apocalyptic villain.
Mm.
We're not going, oh my God, the entirety of Manhattan will sink into the sea because, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with, okay, we've gotten personal with this. And again, having been a fan of crime movies for a long time, obviously there's the line from Godfather. We all know, this isn't personal. It's strictly business.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me is in a way the most scary line you can ever say. Because imagine, even if you look at The Godfather itself, which I know is a movie, not a comic book, it's not personal, it's strictly business. Imagine and remember all the things in Godfather that are done because it's strictly business and how horrific they are. That to me brings our antagonists as a crime family and people from a crime family up to a new level that, okay, it's not apocalyptic in Manhattan sinking to the sea, but it could be personally.
I would say this does really get your appetite for who is actually behind this. I mean, this issue does not discuss who was the financial benefactor for the Gargoyle task force. And you wonder, Thylaug has a fortune. They mentioned it in the previous 3 issues. Thylaug, he stole this massive amount of money from Xanatos that Xanatos thought he was basically paying like a ransom for, and he has very smartly embezzled it and invested it, so he has amassed a giant fortune. You also know, fun little side note, hoping Demona shows up here in the next few issues, because Demona also had a fortune.
Quick question, business or personal?
Demona had amassed a giant fortune over the millennia that she had been alive. Demona also has a fortune, a lot of which she combined with Thylaug for that Nightstone Unlimited, but she still has more than enough resources at her disposal. So it's like, did one of those two invest with the Gargoyle task force? You want to know, it's like there is a central linchpin here who's kidnapped the 2 teenagers, the children of the criminal underworld, who is trying to get these 2 factions to fight, who had Goliath taken in by the police. We all know there's someone at the top of the pyramid. We want to know who's at the top of the pyramid, and our minds are racing with all of the characters we have known in the series going, could it be them? Could it be them? Could it be them? And it gets you excited.
Looking at it as a mystery, Demona is probably the best choice. And as such, sorry, Jesse, this is for you since you haven't seen a lot of the episodes. Demona gets to a point where she's like, fuck humanity. They all need to die. Screw all of them. And again, setting humanity against each other in a huge crime war and having Goliath, the one person that she knows could turn the tide of this, locked up. That, if they did that, I'd be very happy. Because that would be a character arc of like, damn, you went hardcore villain. You being really pissed off and saying humanity sucks. They took out, most of our clan. Okay, I can get that. But you going this far, I'm going to salute you. I'm going to go then immediately help Goliath kick your ass. But I'm going to salute you first.
Demona really is one of the absolute greatest villains to come out of an animated TV series of all time, in my opinion. She is so consumed by her hatred of humanity. She has been betrayed by humans time and time again, and she is unwilling to move on from it. She has rebuilt herself out of her hatred. It's very similar to Magneto in a way. Magneto's hatred of humanity, Demona's hatred of humanity. Jesse, you really do need to go watch the series on Disney Plus. They go into how Demona survived for 1,000 years. She wasn't under the stone sleep spell like the others. She survived.
Oh, wow.
Through another means. And you learn how she did it. Hint, magic was involved. But you see her develop, and you start to see why she is so hateful of humanity. And while you want to tell her, get over it, let go, you can't exist like this. You've pushed away everyone. You've pushed away your former mate Goliath. You pushed away your daughter Angela. Your last connection to your former life, and
it's a
but
Deuteronomy.
she can't. She cannot let go.
Title of what is the middle ground between a protagonist and an antagonist.
Say it one more time.
Deuteragonist.
All right, so let me roll that right into my final question, and then I'll turn you guys loose for your final thoughts. But Alexis is humanity aware of the gargoyles up to this point at all?
Again, that's part of where the line with the third season was drawn, because in the third season, the public is made aware.
Oh,
and
okay.
they've cut that. So now they're more of a giant conspiracy theory. They have footage of it, but and now they've captured Goliath, but I don't think they really know what the gargoyles are, what they do, what they're capable of doing. And I mean, again, we have a freaking trial coming up where Goliath, who loves reading Dostoevsky and classic literature. It's like it's established if he's not out on patrol, he's holed up in the library reading. He is a brilliant mind, a brilliant strategist. And
Mark.
And yeah, it's like, oh, we're going to have a trial to see if he's, competent to stand trial. And it's like, he's more competent than you, asshats.
Sentient to stand trial.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. At first, when you were getting into this, I was like, oh, they're going to put him on trial for something. And then, yeah, we've got to first figure out if he's an actual being, which
humanity's first thought would be he's a robot.
Right. Right.
Occam's razor.
Yeah.
Okay, so it moves, and so it has to, is it sentient? And sorry, not to go back to Star Trek, but again, there's a whole episode where Data, who's Brent Spiner, is put on trial. Is he sentient enough to stand trial? Sorry, Jessica,
Yeah.
please continue.
Yeah, you have the line from D.A. Yale. She goes, because they say, well, he's talking, and she goes, parrots can talk.
Oh boy, does she get under your skin?
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that it doesn't stop. Just be ready when we get in the next volume. She's earning her pay. Yeah, Dorian, I mean, what do you think here? We're going to expose the gargoyles are now a public thing. We're having news conferences. They have a gargoyle that is in custody and going to stand trial to figure out if he's sentient or not. What are your thoughts on this turn of events?
I'm excited for it because it seems like many times when a creator of an animated show gets popularity and the show becomes popular, even if it's popular in its short run or it lasts for 1 million years. I like the fact when creators of stories bring something to what can be a conclusion without just a slam the door in the face situation of like, and everybody died, go home, So I'm very interested to see where they take this. Because this, to me, before this review, after I'd read Here in Manhattan, I did go back and I watched all the episodes that I had missed that had not been on the DVD burning and such that I'd gotten, and because I wanted to be caught up as much as I could. And I actually was lucky enough, as busy as I was, to get through everything. This has been a long time coming. Again, we talked about Demona and the conversations that her and Goliath have had, like humanity is this, humanity is that, blah blah blah. This seems, and again, maybe this is just what I got from the art that they had of Goliath in the cell, of almost an old warrior going, it's enough. It's enough. We have done this for too long. It's enough. I want them to know, let them make their decision. If their decision is to destroy me, fine. I have fought for all these many years. I have lost so much. I have continued to fight despite that. But you know what? Let them decide. It is their world. And there was a beauty to that without making the archetypical old warrior who's just going to give up. This was, I'm still going to fight, but rules are rules.
Right.
And again, to me, my final thought on that was that, especially since he's in a romantic relationship with an officer of the law, it's like, if I profess to love her, I have to follow the rules that guides her heart and her soul. They have asked me to stand down. I will stand down.
I think there's also a lot to the fact that Goliath knows that if he escapes, if he has Brooklyn and Coldfire break him out and he takes off, it will be war on his kind. They will essentially say it's like they refuse to stay in trial. They just broke out. He knows that if he leaves, it's just going to be open season on the rest of the clan.
And I would agree entirely if it wasn't for the character that we've seen of Goliath so far. And that's where my points come from. This isn't just avoiding war. This is your world. It's your rules. And that's the reason I brought that forward. In many cases, in one night, with the gargoyles we have, we could wipe out and enslave humanity. And I'm using we as like, if we were part of them, we had wings and we could do all this fun crap. To me, Goliath's character has always been more about his heart and his soul and his beliefs. And I believe that is why he has stood down, even though, again, he wouldn't even need necessarily them to break him out. He could probably break the wall down himself. There's more to his decision than just brute strength.
Right.
Loved the book. I am so pleased that Greg Weisman was able to come back and give the fans truly what they wanted. I always get nervous when someone who is either new or someone who may not have been that involved with the original story arc says, okay, we're going to continue it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when the original creator comes back and he goes, I know what this means to you, and I know what it will mean if I totally fuck this up. I love that he gave us something that we love, and I feel that it is a great continuation of the characters, of their evolution. I'm so happy to see, where all of these characters that I grew up loving, where they are. I'm excited that freaking, Broadway and Angela are essentially engaged, because we have a scene with them talking about Coldfire, and she's going to officiate their commitment ceremony, which I guess is a gargoyle wedding. And again, it's just like I love that because, there was a freaking episode of the original TV series where the three, this was before Brooklyn met Katana, obviously, where Brooklyn, Lexington, and Broadway were hitting on Angela nonstop because she was the first female gargoyle, aside from Demona, that they had seen in 1,000 years. And it's driving her insane. And they keep calling her Angie, and it's driving her. They finally go into battle, and she just lays down the law, and she's like, enough! And stop calling me Angie. But they established that she did.
Call me Junior. Look what you did. I can't believe what you did.
That she does end up choosing Broadway. And I love seeing them together. I love that I've seen these characters grow and fall in love with things like that. That's how much the story means to me.
Yeah. Again, it is a testament to comic books being able to continue something where you're just not going to be able to find that slot on television, or you're going to be able to find that network to actually put something on TV. Although there seems to be a little bit more freedom nowadays of what they can. Maybe it's just a matter of there's just not enough demand in their eyes, because I know there are plenty of fans of this show. I'll give my final notes and I'll throw it to you here in a second, Dorian. But as far as this book, I'm coming into this completely fresh, have no clue what happened before. I've never read any of the comics before. I just knew there was a series, and I was really intimidated at first because I was like, there's so much lore going into this and the stuff that happened way before that I don't know anything about. Just show me the main characters, let me get into this. And then by the end of issue 1, I felt perfectly fine. I felt welcomed into the Gargoyles universe, and I was able to follow the story just as well. The good thing is that doing a comic book podcast, I did some due diligence and research and also learned a lot over the past few weeks, so I could be a little more familiar as to why so-and-so is her brother looks like a panther, like Derek's, I don't understand what happened here. Somebody tell me, because they're not doing that in this comic. But the thing is, you don't need to know that. You just need to know. Because they do mention Alpha in a side note, but it's not like they spend a whole page and a half explaining the whole history of what happened with Derek. But that's just a small example of okay, there is a lot that goes into each one of these characters, and I'm not overburdened with needing to understand that in order to enjoy this story. The other thing is that this is a good story. This is a good story. Sometimes you bring these properties back and you're struggling. Like, I could tell you there's some Ghostbusters comics that I've read that I'm just like, man, you probably should have stopped while you were ahead. This doesn't need to actually be out there.
Every now and then, all of a sudden, it goes into Dial of Destiny territory.
Right. You had a premise. I understand. You wanted to execute it. Well, the good thing is comics are there for you to do that. You've got your story out there. You've told the story, whether it was a good one or not. You had your shot. This is a good story. I do like what they're doing with these characters and what's upcoming. And, I knew that this is a big deal, that the Gargoyles have been trying to protect humanity, but remain on the outskirts and not be noticed. And now that is just thrown out the window. People know you're there. So I know it's a big change. So I'm excited to see what's coming up next in the next 6 issues. So Dorian, you have the floor, man.
I'm going to make this very quick. If you got brought to this podcast, first of all, welcome. As somebody who's the first timer as well, it's been a lot of fun. And I hope you as a listener had as much fun. But if you got brought here by somebody who knew Gargoyles, if you haven't seen Gargoyles, first and foremost, and again, they are not, and I underline, they are not paying us to say this. Get Disney Plus. Go watch Gargoyles, the first 2 seasons. Actually, watch all 3 seasons. A lot of people worked really hard on them, and they did a fantastic job. Watch those episodes, and again, get this comic book. Again, Gargoyles here in Manhattan. Get the comic book, read it. It's fantastic. And if you're here as a Gargoyles fan and you didn't like it, remember one thing: go write your own, because nobody's going to write the Gargoyles story that you want to see better than you. So go out there and get that and make it happen. And overall, to the Gargoyles fans who are like, hey, we kind of came in late to the game, but we love it still to this day. I don't even need to say anything. You guys have probably already read this comic book. And if you haven't, I refer to my earlier statement. Go get it and read it. It's fantastic. And again, come back to source material. We'll be covering eventually the next half of it.
Amen. Yeah, I'm sure that the next, because they've hit issue 12 already, I'm pretty sure. So the next trade's got to be dropping, I would imagine, before the end of the year. So just keep your ears out on that. That'll certainly pop up, I'm sure, and we'll be promoting it. So speaking of promotion, now that we have talked about the comic, I know where to throw my promos. But first, Dorian's going to throw some promos here. What's going on?
For those of you watching the video of this, you can see literally right down here at Frankie Pictures, PHRIKE Pictures on Instagram, on Facebook. If it needs to be photographed, it needs to be filmed. If it needs to be created, period, hit us up. We want to help make your vision a possibility. We finished a music video for a musical group called the Ryan Express. That is the Ryan, as in the name, Express, which you can find on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be finishing up one later this next week for Drew 6. That is also the name Drew 6 on the number 6.
I was like, is that DREW or DRU?
DREW.
Thank you.
And then the letter 6. We've got a personal project that's called Trash Head. So that should be very interesting. The entire story is done in rhyme.
Ooh.
So we're very excited about that. The production crew has been working on the designs and such. So that's what I've been up to. And honestly, just filming a whole bunch of bands. And if I was going to name every single one of them, we'd be here probably another hour. So I'm going to shut up.
Wow.
But you're all awesome. And you know I'm talking about you.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and can't wait to have you back on. So, all right, Alexis, time to pay the bills.
Very much so. But first, I should say that if this is coming out the night I believe it's coming out on audio only, we will also be doing our Damn You Hollywood for Inside Out 2. That's going to be myself, Mark Radulich, Robert Winfrey, and my co-conspirator in animation, Zachary Strobel, who I just had on to talk about the Garfield movie. So other than that, we have a couple more TV Party Tonights coming up pretty soon because we have some really great TV shows that are starting their next seasons. We got House of the Dragon starting soon, season 2.
Oh boy.
Yeah, another hour is discussing. Did the name Sheep Stealer come before or after? We also have The Boys season 4. Looking forward to talking about that. We're also doing another Damn You Hollywood, or Zachary and I will be doing another Damn You Hollywood before too long for The Wild Robot. That's going to be coming out before too long. Very excited. That looks like an absolutely beautiful animated film. So we should have a lot of fun discussing that. And yeah, I know there's a handful of other source materials, Jesse, that you and I have been talking about. How the serial one to you. We have the Spider-Punk one that we've wanted to do for ages. I want to talk about Captain Anarchy.
Oh, man.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we got all that. As far as the plugs that actually do pay the bills, that is Honeysuckle Rose Creations, where fashion meets fandom at the intersection of geek and chic, makers of awesome handmade geek-themed jewelry, including... You can see this is our Gargoyles charm bracelets, one of my favorites I've ever created. It's also one of our biggest sellers. You have the entire Manhattan clan plus Demona, plus a nice little silhouette of Wyvern Castle, as it would undoubtedly be seen on top of Xanatos Tower. So again, that is on both our Etsy store and our Handmade at Amazon store. If that's not your thing, we got tons of other fun geek themed jewelry. We're still waiting to hear back if we landed our table for the Greater Austin Comic-Con. Really hoping they approve us because we've gone there for several years and it's one of my favorite shows. Austin is such a great town. I love going down there. But we will definitely be heading out in August to the Colorado Springs Comic-Con. Cannot wait. Love doing that show. We always have a blast. And I love Colorado Springs. Great town. We'll be heading after that to the Cincinnati Comic Expo. And then back here in our hometown of Kansas City, we have Planet Anime that will be happening later this fall. I think they've announced a handful of the voice actors from various animes who are coming, but I need to double check that list. We'll have more guests as they announce it. Okay. And as always, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I will never call it X, and TikTok.
Folks, you're listening to this in audio form. You're probably on the Source Material Comics feed. We got 3 shows right now that are primarily featured on the Source Material Comics feed. Number 1, Source Material Comics Podcast. You're listening to it right now. You can go back in the archive. We've got over 300 episodes of this here podcast itself. We talk about comic book stories from any era. So there's probably, if it's something big that has happened in the comic book realm, we've probably covered it. We also have the Unspoken Issues podcast where we discuss 90s comics. And that's kind of strictly all we stick to is comics that happened in the 90s. We're talking Image, Marvel, DC, just about any publisher you can think of, and publishers you probably haven't thought of because they got buried when the crash happened. Then we have Snap Material where myself and Evan Bevins get together and talk about Marvel Snap, that mobile card game. It's taken the world by storm, and we're having a good time talking about that. I think this week we just dropped 4 episodes in a row. Evan and I have a good time talking about previous season, upcoming season, some of the stuff we've seen during the seasons, lots of cards. We're having a blast. Yesterday released myself and Mark Radlich on Source Material talking about and finishing up our 3rd part of the Lois Lane series that we discussed. It was a 12-issue series by Greg Rucka. And it was pretty good. It was a lot about journalism and seeking the truth. And then there was definitely some multiverse crap thrown in there because DC said, hey, Greg Rucka, remember, we had a crisis one time. We got to talk about it. So that happened. Well, at least once. At least once. And then upcoming on Unspoken Issues, you can hear me, Dean, and Derry discussing the Punisher Summer Special. The Punisher had a lot of specials in the 90s, celebrating holidays of all things. And one of them is the summer special, where I think we had 4 stories. I'm pretty sure it was 4 stories, 3 of which were really great, and one of which was extremely Islamophobic because the war was going on at the time. It was bad. And we had a discussion about that. But there it is, folks. Appreciate you joining us there to listen to us talk about Gargoyles, and we really hope that you come back and listen to us talk about them again. So with that being said, we're out of here. That's Dorian. Over there is Alexis. I'm Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.